Hi, this is chapter 13 and our last chapter for the middle childhood age group. So, we want to always talk about Erickson's stages during social emotional development. So, at this point, we're talking middle childhood. So, I like to think of elementary age children. The stage that they're going through at this age is industry versus inferiority. So here is the positive outcome slide, and then we'll look at the negative outcome slide. So if the conflict is resolved positively, children at this age develop a sense of industry, which is a feeling of competence at useful skills and tasks. You can also think of it as confidence in their abilities. And industry combines several developments in middle childhood, right? But their concept, their accomplishments, their cooperation with others. So, all of that plays into how they feel about their own abilities. Now, what happens if it's a more negative outcome? We again have to think about the influence of the social, right? So, the environment is somehow engaging with this child where they have developed a sense of inferiority to others, where they feel that they're less than others, they have a lack of confidence, they're pessimistic. And again, if you think about it, the family, teachers, peers can all contribute to the negative feelings just as much as they can contribute to the positive. So, if we're thinking about children at this age, we really want to be careful with our criticisms and instead want to encourage them to keep developing their skills. Now, again, it's this tension, this stage between being productive and feeling incompetent. So, again, children start to judge themselves, as a winner or a loser, good or bad. So, the outcome of this stage is really important because, again, it plays into the stages that come later, like adolescence and adulthood. Now, what about the role of culture in this age group, right? Well, children, again, are improving physically and cognitively, and adults hopefully are making new challenging and appropriate demands. But teachers and parents need to provide a variety of areas so children can succeed. Some may do well in academics, may do well socially, in sports, right? If we think of kind of those multiple intelligences, children have different areas of strengths. And if you also think about culture with that, we may be encouraging or even promoting different skills within children. So in Cameroon, Africa, they are um, typically hunters and gatherers. Well, their 5 to 7 year olds are building huts and building fires and caring for the young. And I have a little video clip you can watch here. But in the US, you think of 5, 6, 7 year olds, they're in kindergarten, first grade, they're valuing work and commitment and responsibility. It's very different. It's not the same type of life skills that other children may be developing in other countries. And now, if we focus on the self a little bit, first we can think of self concept. So, cognitively, things are happening, the child is experiencing life. Socially, they're engaging with parents and peers. And then, on top of that, culturally, are they encouraged to be interdependent or independent? So, that plays into their feelings of self worth and their concept of self. Now, when you think about the biggest influences on our self esteem at this age are our culture and our parenting. So, in cultures that emphasize really strongly on comparing others, those children tend to have lower self esteem. If you're constantly hearing, why aren't you getting straight A's like your sister? Why aren't you, if you're totally constantly being compared and you can't live up to that, you'll have lower self esteem. Now, in research, they find that many times parents with gender stereotyped beliefs have an end result of boys having higher self esteem. So when you think of gender stereotypes, you think, well, maybe they're again having the stereotype that my daughter needs to stay home because if she gets out, she's going to get in trouble, and but my son can go out and it's fine. Well, again, sons will have higher self esteem in those aspects. So we just have to be careful about the way that we approach our children because the expectations, again, play into their behavior and their self esteem. Now, we've been dealing with parenting from the beginning of class. So when you look at these parenting styles, authoritative parents, children tend to have higher self esteem. Authoritarian parents, those dictators, the children tend to have lower self esteem. And with permissive parents, many times the children have this unrealistic sense of self worth, self concept, self esteem. They just kind of feel like they can do anything because they've kind of had free reign of decision making. And here's some more contributions to self esteem. So, again, children are looking at their academic competence, their social competence, their physical competence, and even their appearance. All of that plays into their general self esteem. Now, more influences on self esteem are things like achievement related attributions. Now, we have mastery oriented and we have learned helplessness. Children who develop mastery oriented approaches to learning credit their success to their ability. I'm smart. That's why I did well on that test. I studied hard. And again, they know they'll improve by trying hard and believe if they failed, it was just due to not enough effort. I didn't study enough, I didn't review it enough, but next time I can achieve it. I can keep moving forward. Well, learned helplessness is kind of the opposite. They think their success is due to external factors like, "Ooh, I got so lucky the teacher let me pass on that," rather than actually contributing it to their abilities. And when they fail, they think that it's due to their ability. And since they can't do it, then why would they try harder, right? So I'm stupid. Why would I keep doing it? I'm not good at math. I'm not. They develop this kind of pessimistic attitude that they can't move past and just focus on get through that test, get through that class, get through that grade, rather than actually focusing on learning goals and trying to move forward. So, when we think about learned helplessness in the classroom, instead of always responding to students with yes or no, maybe ask them, why do you think that? Ask them those more open ended questions. So, what else could you try? Have you Googled it? Have you experimented with something else? Do you think this is true? Right? There's so many ways that we can engage children to keep investigating further and to try to find the answer. So, again, stop giving answers, allow for failure, because again, questions are a powerful way for students to help themselves in the process of learning. So, resilience is another term that comes into play, and it's the ability to adapt in the midst of adversity and to overcome stress. And I'm sure many of you can look back at times in your life when you've been resilient. You were able to overcome something in your life, even though maybe at that time it felt like it was impossible. Well, what are the components to resilience? It's dynamic, it's ever changing, but it's also a positive adaptation, right? So typically the adversity is really significant in order for a child to need to be resilient. So how do we foster resilience in children? Again, personally, it's easy if you have easygoing temperament and a high IQ. But again, we can't always control all of those things, but we can work on those things to have a more positive outlook. Again, family, we can't always do a lot about our family relationships or even the school we go to or the community we live in. But what we find is that when we have high quality and warmth and, you know, um, those positive elements, more than likely the child develops that sense of resilience. Now, again, dealing with diversity and inequality at this age, it can be difficult for children. Children typically absorb the prevailing social attitudes, the majority, and much of that comes with privilege of typically white privilege and unfortunately an inferior status sometimes with people of color. So again, children don't only pick up very clear messages, but underhanded comments and just even reactions. So when children observe others, they might start to form biased attitudes themselves. So by age 7 to 8, we find that a lot of children have in-group favoritism, where again, people who are in their class, in their friend, they favor those that they consider in their group. But again, whether we have in-group favoritism or prejudice against out-group, meaning, again, people who are in our similar cultural backgrounds, the extent to which we hold those biases depend on a lot of factors, right? The child personally, but also the social world they're growing up in, their family and friends' opinions, even their teachers. And, again, all of that plays into how a child molds their thoughts. So, how can we reduce prejudice with young children? Interact in inner groups, right? Where from all racial and ethnic backgrounds where we show we all have equal status. We're all working towards the same thing. We become acquainted, we work together. So, again, showing children that we can change. You might come from this certain closed mindedness, but you can overcome that. And change is always possible. Now, that also plays into, bullies and peer victimization. We find 20% of children are bullies and 25% are victimized. So, cyberbullying is a big thing now. 20 to 40% of youths have experienced um, it versus it being physical, verbal, or relational. And the approaches to reducing bullying, I have a link here that you can look at. But again, changing the victimized children's negative opinions and then also promoting those pro social attitudes and behaviors. So there are a few links here that you're welcome to click on and get some more information. So, peer groups, how are they formed? Again, typically it's based on proximity, who lives close together, who's doing similar activities. They'll many times adopt similar dress and behavior. But what we want to look out for is relational aggression and exclusion. Again, this many times can become a norm among groups if a negative attitude starts to spread. It can spread very easily. So those friendships now at this age are more complex. Trust starts to become a big factor of that. Again, are you telling my secrets? Can you keep this, confidential? They're more selective. What we find is the high quality friendships tend to be more stable. Those are ones typically that can last, into adulthood. And how the friendship is depends on so many things, right? Kindness and compassion or aggression and hostile, friends again typically become more similar. So if it's more positive, that's great. If it's more negative, again, that'll have its own negative connotations. So when we think about peer acceptance, researchers actually went out and actually interviewed children, got their own words and self-reports about how they felt about others, and from there they developed categories. So let's say they had a group of children in a classroom, they would ask them all individually, who do you like to play with? If you were partnered with someone, who would you want to be partners with? And the children who got many positive votes would be popular children. On the opposite side, if you asked who would you not want to be partners with, there are rejected children who many times are actively mentioned by other children as not being liked. Then you have controversial children where they rub some people the right way and some people the wrong way and get a mix of feedback. And then the one to really watch out for is the neglected children. Has this child been in the same class as all these other children but is not mentioned either way, positively or negatively? Again, that can mean maybe extreme social isolation or other issues going on with that child that we would definitely want to check in with because, again, they're going into adolescence and things, if there are issues, could get even worse. So, how do we help those rejected children? We coach, we model, we reinforce those positive skills. And again, sometimes we can train them and trying to take perspectives of others and trying to understand, what's happening. But many interventions focus on the parent child because maybe that's coming from a feeling of rejection from their own parents. So getting deeper into the family typically is helpful. Now, gender typing in middle childhood is occurring. Stereotyping by gender is pretty well established by age 5. It extends to again who you are as a person, your traits, and even in subject areas. Well, that flexibility again is not always easy for children to understand that boys and girls don't have to be a certain gender, fall into a certain category. But we do find sex segregated peer associations. So girls hanging out with girls and boys with boys strengthens during middle childhood. Um, and again, that gender plays a role in that and how we're identifying with the groups that we are associating with. So here are some more gender terms. So gender typical typical, I can't say it right, but the degree to which children feel similar to others of the same gender. So again, you think about some children who don't feel similar to their gender and feel displaced. They also have gender contentedness to where you feel comfortable in your assignment. So there's feeling similar to others, there's feeling comfortable in your own gender assignment. And then there's also many times pressure to conform to gender roles, right? Getting pressure from others and feeling like you need to change to fit into this mold of gender. And I think what we're starting to realize over time is yes, you're born with your sex, but gender is a construct. It's something we as a society have developed, and that means that it could also be changed. So, lastly, I just want to point out again, your school age assignment is coming up due soon. So, you want to make sure that you're focusing on these categories. Again, the first two categories can really focus on anything in regard to concepts we've covered. But cooperative play was discussed, industry versus inferiority was discussed this chapter, spatial reasoning, conservation with Piaget, peer acceptance is also covered in this chapter, and motor development. So feel free to look back at previous chapters and find those areas to concentrate on in your assignment. Email me with any questions.